Hey! Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. A warm welcome to you all. My name is Tobias and on my channel I talk about music. And you know what? We're already 2 days into the month of June of 2024. And that means it's high time to do another retrospective of 1984, more precisely May of 1984. So how these retrospectives works is that I look back on one of the more popular radio programs in Sweden in 1984. Because I grew up in Sweden and it all makes sense, right? So the program in question was called Poporama. And Poporama, they played a bunch of new releases each week for us, and what we could do as listeners was to vote on these singles, and hopefully our favorite were charting on the next week's Poporama and so forth and so on. So it's all in our hands, so it wasn't about the selling charts, even if they do correlate somewhat, of course. But the most important thing, we were in control of the charts for Poporama. So yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll go through all the new singles that were played on the last Poporama of said month. In this case, it was on the 31st of May 1984. So that is the list I'm going to go through. I'm also going to go through some of the other entries throughout May of 1984 from Poporama, because some of them didn't chart for more than a week, perhaps, or two. And I'll pick up some things that are of interest for me, things that I remember, or things I discovered later on, but I think is of importance, at least to me. And hopefully you will enjoy it as well. And to round things off for these retrospectives, I also have a look at the UK charts, all through May, in this case, of 1984. And I'll pick some singles that never charted in Sweden, but did chart in the UK, and is, of course, of interest for me as well, and hopefully for you. So that's the summary, basically. And we're just going to kick things off for the 31st of May 1984, the Poporama list. The first new single that was played came from a Swedish synth-pop group that I really adore. This is Adolphson Falk, and the track is called Över tid och rum.
Som vågorna har burit fram över tid och rum.
Yeah, Adolphson Falk and the track Över tid och rum, roughly translated over time and space. And it is a superb synth-pop duo from Sweden. And I was a bit surprised by this one, because in my mind I always thought it was new singles that were being played on Poporama. And I can't for the life of me find any single of this specific track taken from this album, which is also called Över tid och rum, so it's the same title, right? I can't find a promo of it, anything that was released on single. There was basically just one single released from this album, and it's a completely different track, and it's later on in 1984. So what I think is that this track was played to promote this album. It's just a theory of mine, but I think that is the case, because there's no single release at all from that one. But beside that, it's a really good synth-pop track. If you like really good synth-pop, I would highly recommend this one. The lyrics, though, are... they do weigh in on this, because I'm not a big lyric guy, really. If it's good music, it's good music to me. Sometimes I don't really listen to the lyrics, but in the case of Adolphson Falk, it's the very, can I say, intelligent lyrics that drives the whole thing. But of course the arrangements as well is just wonderful. Really, really good. And I know that they also released some tracks and even whole albums in English, though they re-recorded them in English basically. But I don't think they had much success in doing this outside of Sweden. So yeah, but a great track. But I think it was to promote this specific album, because Adolphson Falk, they tend to record most or a lot of tracks, I would say, in the Swedish radio's studios, Sveriges Radio, as it was called. They utilized a lot of their studios to record their music, and they did some jingles from for other popular programs at the time as well. Yeah, but I'm really pleased to see this one entered the chart, even if it just stayed for 1 week. Adolphson Falk, Över tid och rum. The next single is from someone I think all of you can relate to. This is Cyndi Lauper and the single Time After Time.
Lying in my bed, I hear the clock tick and think of you.
I just recently listened back to Cyndi Lauper's debut album She's So Unusual, where this track Time After Time is taken from as well, and I think it holds up really well, just like this track, of course. I think it's a beautiful song by Cyndi Lauper. And the previous year, in 1983, she of course had her big debut single, I would say. The big breakthrough was Girls Just Wanna Have Fun, right? But this one, to my recollection, was really big as well. But to my surprise, reading the Poporama stats, she only spent 2 weeks with this song, Time After Time, on the Poporama charts. And I think they peaked at number 6 or something like that. But once again, it's not the selling charts that we're going to go through. It is the Poporama charts, and it's tough out there, right? Because they played a bunch of new singles each week, and they all had to compete to stay on that Poporama chart. So there's very few of them that stay there for weeks and weeks, right? So it could still have been a big hit for her, which of course it was. But on the Poporama charts, only 2 weeks. Well, I'll try to keep things really short today to not make these retrospectives so lengthy, because I tend to make things really lengthy here on my YouTube channel. So let's just move on to the next new single on this Poporama chart. When preparing for these retrospectives, what I usually do is just to go through the lists, listening back to the songs, of course, and most of the time I do recognize them, and sometimes it's one of those aha moments where I'm like, of course I remember this one, but I forgot about it for all these years, and the song seems even bigger or better today. In those cases, I will find out some more about those artists because I'm curious. But most of the times I try not to do that. I'm trying to pull the information from my poor old brain here, right? Just trying to remember what I felt back then listening to it. And of course what I feel listening to it today. So I'm trying to keep it as genuine as possible and pull that information from my brain. But yeah, so back to Barry Flynn. I listened to this one a couple of times and it still doesn't ring a bell. I can't remember hearing this one ever, really. But I must have, because I think I listened to every single Poporama that was on in 1984. But yeah, no, Barry Flynn, the name, the song, nothing rings a bell. And I'm not really curious. I'm sorry to say that to all you Barry Flynn fans out there. It didn't stick to me back then, it doesn't stick to me now, so yeah. This one, of course, I do recognize. This is the Human League and the wonderful single, The Lebanon. But I have to be honest with you, the Lebanon was probably something that I discovered way later. I would say a year, perhaps 2 years later, when really getting into the Human League and the back catalogue. At this point in 1984, I think my knowledge about the Human League was Don't You Want Me, with so many others were discovering the Human League through that song. Which, by the way, I'm sick and tired of. It's one of those singles that I heard so much throughout the years. I can't really enjoy it anymore. But I have to say, if you really want to listen to some interesting stuff from the Human League, do invest some time and listen to the album Dare, where Don't You Want Me is on. But you can always skip that song and listen to the rest. I think it sticks out like a sore thumb, Don't You Want Me, but that's just my opinion of that song, because I'm so tired of it. But it's so different from the rest of the material on there, I would dare to say. But yeah, that's just my rant about that album. Now back to the Lebanon. Like I said, wonderful, wonderful single. But me, with so many others, didn't really pay much attention to it. So only was played once on the Poporama charts in May. And that was this date, the 31st of May 1984. Just 1 week for the Human League. So now, go on with the next new single. This is Steve Perry and the track Oh Sherry. And Steve Perry, the name, it did a bell went off in my head because I do recognize this name. So in this case, I had to look it up because I couldn't really connect the points here. And he was one of the lead singers in one of the iterations of Journey, the band Journey. So that's probably where I heard it at some point. Can't say I'm a big fan of Journey, but yeah, I did recognize the name at least. And this is probably his solo effort. I don't know if it was a brand new effort. So if you're a Steve Perry or Journey fan listening to this, please give me some information down in the comments about Steve Perry. I do recognize this song as well, so it stuck to me somewhat back in 1984, but I'm a bit neutral on this one. Let's be diplomatic here. Yeah, I'm a bit neutral about this one. It doesn't really excite me too much. So, sorry, Steve Perry fans out there. Keep things short, like I said. Let's move on to the next new single.
Going through the motions, I sweat, I sweat.
Nona Hendryx with the song I Sweat, going through the motions. And you know what? For once, I do vaguely remember this one, and I'm not too opposed to it. I think it's a good pop song. And you know, another thing, I know something about Nona Hendryx as well, because she was one part of a trio called, hopefully I get this right, La Belle. Because I think Patti LaBelle was in that group as well, so it was named after Patti LaBelle. They had a big hit in the mid-70s, I would say, with a song that's very famous today, Lady Marmalade. But I don't think they were the first group to record it, but they made it really famous. But like I said, I could be wrong on this one. But she, at least, Nona Hendryx, was part of LaBelle. Yeah. And here she is doing her solo thing, just like Steve Perry. And I think in my book, she does a better job. This can actually stick to me somewhat today. I think it's a good song that would end up one of my playlists perhaps today. Yeah, so yeah, I think she's done a good job there. And of course, she had other hits throughout the 80s, but I think they were condensed to this period of 84, 85. Was the big years for Nona Hendryx. And by the way, she only spent 1 week as well on this shot. We had a lot of short stints here so far, but yeah, 1 week for Nona Hendryx. Let's move things forward. Next new single. Yeah, this one I would hope to have a soundbite for you, and I couldn't find any. I looked and looked. This entry is for a Swedish singer-songwriter called Björn Holm, and the song is Fri med dig. Roughly translated, free with you, or I'm free when I'm with you. Yeah, something like that. They have a lot of Björn Holm songs that you can stream and so forth and so on. I found one that was just called Free, or Fri, in Swedish, but I'm not sure it's the same song, so yeah, we'll just leave it there. What I can say about Björn Holm is that I do know who it is. I've heard a couple of songs with him. He was really big in 85, 86, around that time, and I do remember now listening back to some of those songs. I do remember them, and he was a pretty good singer and a songwriter, I would say, but yeah, this one, Fri med dig, that spent 1 week as well. We had a lot of short stints, like I said before, on this list so far. And this one, sadly, only 1 week as well. So let's move on to the next new single on this Poporama shot.
This comes for higher, even if we're just dancing in.
This one, of course, I do remember. This is Bruce Springsteen and Dancing in the Dark. And boy, what a year he had in 1984. I think this was the year when he really broke through to the wide audiences. Of course, there was people who knew about him before, but to the wide audiences, the pop listening public and all that, this was a big year for him. Because I don't know if May of 1984, he already released his album Born in the USA, or it was in June he was going to release it. Anyhow, I just remember 1984, the summer of 1984, it was a big Bruce Springsteen period there. Even I'm not the biggest fan of Bruce Springsteen, not even back then. Even I had the album Born in the USA on a cassette album. Yeah, that's how big it was. It seemed like everyone was listening to Bruce Springsteen back then. And I have to say, this one still holds up really well. I especially like the video. I think that helped it really well. When you watch that video, you can see what a showman he is. And at the end of it, he invites that girl from the audience, which turns out to be Courtney Cox, of course, of Friends fame. But this was way, way before that. So was this her big breakthrough as well? Who knows? But yeah, I think that video just goes to show what a great showman Bruce Springsteen is. And I do think he's a great songwriter. He's got a great voice and all that. But still, I don't have it in my collection today. But if anyone forced me to sit down and say, hey, we're going to listen to Bruce Springsteen, I wouldn't be opposed to it at all. Because like I said, I do think he does write some really good songs and I do like him. Oh yeah, and this one, unlike so many others we've gone through so far, spent a bit more time on the Poporama chart. Dancing in the Dark spent 3 weeks on the Poporama charts, I'm really pleased to say. But yeah, that's enough about Bruce Springsteen. Let's now move on to the next new single that was played on this Poporama.
Boys do fall in love.
This one I do fondly remember. This is another case where I'm hearing a song and I'm like, yeah, of course I remember this one. I haven't heard it for years and years, and what a great song. Not over the moon, like I'm with some of the others that I rediscovered, so to speak. But yeah, a really, really catchy pop song. This is, of course, Robin Gibb and Boys Do Fall in Love. And Robin Gibb being one of the Bee Gees, of course, and in the early 80s, I think all of them did had a shot at least at a solo career, or they produced other artists and so forth and so on. But yeah, Robin Gibb, I think that is a standout for me when remembering the Gibb brothers. Yeah, like I said, really, really catchy song. But unfortunately, I only stayed 1 week on the Poporama charts. But he will live on some of my playlists, at least for a week or two. Yeah. What a great one. Boys Do Fall in Love, Robin Gibb. Let's move on to the next one. We now come to the last new single that was played on this Poporama, the 31st of May 1984. This is another Swedish artist called Mikael Rickfors, and the song is called Blue Fun.
So baby, can I go with you? Blue fun.
I am very aware of who Mikael Rickfors is. He is a rock blues legend in Sweden. He's been working with a lot of different artists, both in Denmark and Sweden, and I think even internationally. Very talented blues and rock musician. Not a big fan of this kind of music, really, but I do acknowledge his talent. This one I don't remember from back in the day. Don't stick to me today either, so let's just leave it at that. Mikael Rickfors and Blue Fun. Oh, and by the way, 1 week as well on the Poporama chart. Seems to be a trend. Now we're going to move into the chart itself. So in the number 6 spot on this Poporama on the 31st of May 1984, we'll find this song.
I feel a glimpse of your heart losing right from the start.
That was in the number 6 spot on this Poporama chart, Guardian Angel with Masquerade. And this I do remember very fondly, but there is a puzzling bit about this one. So before I recorded this one, I needed to do some research because I don't remember hearing this one with Masquerade, as we just heard and saw. I remember hearing this one with a handsome Italian guy called Nino D'Angelo. At least I think he was Italian. Because this was a song that was popular across the age groups, young and old. And it wasn't me in our family that bought the single. It wasn't my sister. No, it was my parents who bought this single with Nino D'Angelo. And there's nothing weird about that. I was like, yeah, of course, he recorded a cover of this one. I just wasn't aware of this. But it turns out that Masquerade, the original, was released in 1983. The same year, Nino D'Angelo recorded a cover of this one. He recorded it in 3 different languages, in German, in Italian, and in English. And the English one is, according to Discogs, because they have a comprehensive database, right? It's a single that's just released in Canada, and it was called East of Eden for some reason. But I remember my parents having this exact single. It was the same cover with Nino standing there with a blue background, but it was called Guardian Angel, and the B-side had either the Italian version or the German one. But I can't find it anywhere. And I also remember on the cover had not a sticker, but it was printed on there like big hit in Scandinavia or something like that. I clearly remember this, and I don't have the single here to prove it to you, but I can't find it anywhere. All it says is there's one single where you get the German version and the Italian version, and then one unique single released in Canada with the English version on it. But he didn't sing East of Eden in that English version that I remember. It was Guardian Angel with Nino D'Angelo, but I can't find it anywhere. Anyhow, fast forward to 1984. I must have heard this one as well. Did I assume it was Nino D'Angelo again, or did I actually pick up that it was Guardian Angel by the original artist, Masquerade? I can't tell you. All I can tell you is that I really like this song. I still think it holds up somewhat today. It's got a good melody, it sticks in your head and all of that. Yeah, but yeah, that puzzling part, I think this grants a special on this, a real deep dive into what happened here. Why did Nino D'Angelo do a cover in the first place? But most importantly, how many versions were released and where were they released? Yeah, I really need to investigate this. Hello there, this is Tobias in the future, doing some editing, doing some reading about Nino D'Angelo, basically multitasking here. I was so curious about this one, so I read something here that I missed before. And it turns out he wasn't from Italy at all. He's German-born singer and actor, but he thought he was so similar to the Italian singer Nino D'Angelo. So he assumed that alias. It's so puzzling, it's all it says. I really think that if I'm not doing it, someone out there, you who are watching this, do a deep dive on this. This could be really interesting. I think, what was he doing? Trying to pull off the looks and being Nino D'Angelo? I don't know at all. This is so weird. Yeah, I just want to say that because it was so mind-blowing to me when I read that. Now back to Tobias in the past. Yeah, before we move on, I just want to say this Masquerade and the Guardian Angel spent 3 weeks on the Poporama charts in May of 1984. Now let's move on to the number 5 spot. Lionel Richie there with the song Hello, a huge hit for him in 1984. It's a good ballad, I think, and I spoke about Lionel Richie here before on previous episodes. I'm not the biggest fan of him. I do appreciate his talents and all of that, and I think it's a decent ballad, Hello. A bit of a creepy video then, but yeah, hey ho. The song is still okay. Popular, like I said, 3 weeks on the charts, on the Poporama charts. So it just goes to show people really love this one. And I think it's one of those songs that a lot of people associate today with one of the big hits from the 1984, or the 1980s, I would say. One of the classic 80s songs. But enough about Lionel Richie, and now off to the number 4 spot on this Poporama list.
It's over, it's over.
Ultravox there with Dancing with Tears in My Eyes. And this was, dare I say, the big breakthrough for Ultravox, because before this one, in the early 80s, they had, of course, Vienna, which was a big hit. But in between Vienna and Dancing with Tears in My Eyes, there is a bit of a gap where you don't have this huge of a hit from Ultravox. So I think with the wider audiences, or they became a household name, basically. And Midge, of course, is going to do some solo adventures here as well in a year or two as well. So yeah, but yeah, back to Dancing with Tears in My Eyes. Big hit to spend 3 weeks on the Poporama charts, and that just goes to show how popular it was. And the video for this one was shown more than once on Swedish television, and I remember it was a bit scary. And now looking back at it as well, it's got that sense of doom over it, because it's all about a nuclear blast, right? And spending the last couple of minutes you have, or an hour or whatever, with your loved ones or your loved one. Yeah, it's a brilliant video, and I remember always feeling very sad when I saw this video back in the day, and it brings back a lot of memories for me listening. Even just listening to this song, I do remember the images from this video, and that's what they wanted to convey as well, the horrors of a nuclear blast or a nuclear war. And it was very much on the agenda back in the 80s with the Cold War going on and all of that. But I think it's very topical today as well, unfortunately. But yeah, a good song there from Ultravox that absolutely, in my book, still holds up today. Now on to the number 3 spot on this Poporama list. Self-Control, and it is of course Laura Branigan. Yeah, wow, I can't speak highly enough of Laura Branigan, and certainly not of Self-Control. It's a brilliant song, and I've heard it 1,000 times over, never ever getting tired of it. I still get so excited every time I hear it. It's such a brilliant song. And you know, back in 1984, I had no clue that this one was actually a cover. It is a cover of an Italian artist called Raf. I think it was called, I need to look at my notes here. It was called, his name is Raffaele Riefoli. And I'm sorry about that pronunciation, all you Italians out there. But he was Raf, and he recorded the original one. And I think that's a brilliant one as well. But now looking back on them and comparing them, I'm so sorry to say this, but Laura Branigan blows the original out of the water with her beautiful, strong voice. And I think the production as well is a bit tighter on the Branigan single. But it's not the first time that she actually did a cover of an Italian song. On her first album, she had a big hit with Gloria as well. Another one that I thought was an original Branigan song, but it turns out it's an Italian one, where I think it was sung by, and once again, my notes here, because it's Italian names. It was Umberto Tossi who sang this one, and I think he sang it in Italian, Gloria, and they made an English translation of the lyrics for Laura Branigan. And once again, I'm so sorry to all my Italian viewers out there, but she blows it out of water. Once again, tighter production and the voice of Laura Branigan. But enough about that. Back to Self-Control now. What a great song, and great interpretation there by Laura Branigan. And so far, I haven't been able to show you, I haven't been able to pull anything from my collection to show you anything that correlates with what we've gone through so far on the Poporama list for this time. But this time around, I do have this one. This is, of course, a maxi single of Self-Control. A brilliant version. It's an extended version, bits added here and there on that one. Yeah, just a great one. So it doesn't matter which one you're actually listening to, if it's a single mix, album mix, or this one. It just depends how long you want to dance and sing along with Laura Branigan. And something interesting that I learned when I was doing the preparations for this episode is that the video for this song was actually directed by William Friedkin. And that is, of course, a famous director who made tons of movies that are now classics, like The French Connection and The Exorcist, of course. Had no clue at all before doing this that was actually William Friedkin's work. But you can tell that it could be William Friedkin looking at the video today, of course. And there were some controversies around this video when it was released, believe it or not. It's a very sensual, even sexy video, right? And I think MTV and some other TV stations around Europe said that some scenes need to be either shortened or cut completely. I wasn't aware of this at all, so I don't know if the version that we can watch today on YouTube, for example, is the uncut version, so to speak. But yeah, that was really interesting, and I didn't know that William Friedkin directed this one, but yeah, good job. And you know what? The Poporama listening public really enjoyed this one as well. It spent 6 weeks on the Poporama charts. It just goes to show how brilliant Laura Branigan is. And I'm so thankful that she entered my life at this point, because from now on, I bought a lot of Laura Branigan records, and I loved every one of them. And I still haven't stopped listening to them. They're still a frequent visitor on my turntable today. Yeah, that was Laura Branigan. Let's move on to the next position on this Poporama chart. This was a number 2 position on this Poporama chart, and it's the Swedish rockers Europe. You probably all recognize them. At this point in time, they hadn't really broken through internationally. They will do that, is it 2 years ahead? I think in 1986 with the Final Countdown, of course. But at this point, they were big in Sweden with Open Your Heart. And listening back to this one, yeah, of course, I recognize it. But as I explained to you in my previous episodes, talking about guitar-based rock and hard rock and all that, I wasn't too fond of it back then. So I didn't really take these to my heart. But how about nowadays? Yeah, they spent 5 weeks on the Poporama charts, I can say that. So they were really popular with the listening public. On to the next one, the number 1 spot.
You're the only one who really knew me at all.
And this one, yeah, we do recognize this one. He was with us the last time around. We did a retrospective, Phil Collins, and Against All Odds. 7 whole weeks on the Poporama charts. This was one of the big singles for the summer of 1984. And I already talked about this one. I still think it holds up. I think it's a really good song from Phil. But now we're going to have a bit of a look on some of the other singles that were trying to enter the Poporama charts throughout May of 1984, but didn't really make it. But I think they are worth mentioning here.
Well, you might think I'm delirious, the way I run you down.
The Cars and You Might Think is my first honorable mention, and you might think that this is guitar-based rock and it's something that I didn't want to listen to back in the day, but you know, just listen to it now. I understand why I got a bit fond of this one, and it ended up on a mixtape that I had. And certainly the video as well. I remember watching that a couple of times on Swedish television, and it's a very quirky one, and it's got a lot of special effects, and it's very 80s overall. And I would say it's very 80s when it comes to the production of this one as well, because even if the Cars were a guitar-based band that got that, it's got that 80s productions around it, where you got synthesizers coming in from left and right in the production, and I don't mind that at all. A really, really good pop song there from the Cars. And I do remember a couple of other songs with the Cars as well, but that's how far my knowledge about the Cars goes. But yeah, this is a great one. Now on to the next honorable mention.
Up rockin', stab in the air. If you want a battle, cause the beat's all there.
And these ones we heard before, it's the Rocksteady Crew, and I loved Hey You. Up Rock, it was good, but I don't have that fond of memories of it. But still, it was groundbreaking. It was still groundbreaking at this point, I would say, with the hip hop, the breakdance scene, the electric boogie, and all of that. It was still new and fresh to me, so I did like Up Rock, but it wasn't as good as Hey You in my book. But I did want to include it here because it was such a great one. Yeah. And this one, of course, it is a track that I don't remember from back in 1984, Propaganda and Dr. Mabuse. I talked about Propaganda here before on my channel, but in 1984 I wasn't really aware of them, and this one must have just passed me by somehow, because it only got played once on Poporama in 1984. But this was their debut single, produced by Trevor Horn, but it wasn't until 1985 that I was going to discover Propaganda for real. But that's a story for another time. But I wanted to include it here because it's one of those great, great tracks. The great Trevor Horn productions, one of the great tracks from Propaganda, one of my favorite tracks from them. And I do have this single to show you from my collection. I have a lot of Propaganda in my collection. I got obsessed with them from 1985 onwards. Yeah, this is the original 12-inch Dr. Mabuse, and it is called The 9 Lives of Dr. Mabuse when you get it on this format. On to the next one. Duran Duran and the Reflex, and I think this is the point in time where I actually discovered Duran Duran. I probably heard some of their earlier hits on the radio, but they never really registered with me. This was the first time, to my recollection at least, that I got really excited about the Duran Duran single. Loved this one. And I also bought the album, what was it called? Seven and the Ragged Tiger, later on in 1984, and I love that one as well. The New Moon on Monday, and all of that. It was loads of great songs. So that's probably where it all kicked off for me when it comes to Duran Duran. And of course they're going to have a big year this year, 1984, and certainly in 1985 as well. Yeah, great, great stuff there from Duran Duran. I think the single, by the way, was a remix. So it's quite different from the one you hear on the album, and I think it's remixed by the producer as well, Nile Rodgers, if I'm not mistaken. And it did, unlike the other honorable mentions here today, this one spent 2 weeks on the Poporama charts, and not just 1 week, but 2 weeks. Yeah. But that's enough about Duran Duran for today. Let's move on to the last honorable mentions for this Poporama list of May 1984.
I climbed a mountain, reaching for the skies, and all too soon I jumped the moon and find I'm losing my...
That was Blancmange and Don't Tell Me. And I said earlier that I probably listened to every single episode of Poporama in 1984. That might not be true, or this one just flew right over my head. It only got one play because they only stayed on the chart on Poporama for 1 week. Yeah, so I'm not sure, but I would be acquainted to Blancmange a bit later that year because, and this is a bit strange, a friend of mine went to the video store, and back then you could of course rent the videos on VHS, but you could also rent video compilations from different artists. So I remember at some point we picked up ABC's Man Trap, for example, and watched that one, and were fascinated by it, of course. And then at some point in 1984, he also picked up Blancmange, the video collection of sorts. It was different videos from them, and Don't Tell Me, I'm sure, was on that one. But the one that really got stuck with us was the 1983 single, Living on the Ceiling. And later on, he bought a maxi single of that one, and that was the only Blancmange song that was featured on our mixtapes. Up until another point in 1984 when they released a cover song of from a very famous Swedish band, but we'll come to that one in a future retrospective here on my channel. But yeah, that's my relation to Blancmange. Over the years, I got more acquainted with them, did a deep dive into their back catalogue and so forth and so on, and Don't Tell Me is one of those standout singles from Blancmange, I think. A wonderful piece of pop, in my opinion. Okay, let's now move on, and we're going to move on to the UK charts of May of 1984. Madness and the brilliant single One Better Day. Unfortunately, never charted in Sweden, so that's why it ended up here on our episode as honorable mentions from the UK charts. They had a brand new album out at the time called Keep Moving, and we were just over the moon with this album. And when I say we, it was me and another friend that was just madness crazy. We discovered them with Our House and then going forwards. But I already told you that story in a previous episode. But yeah, I'm really happy to see it did chart in the UK. Here it is, the maxi single of it. It did spend 7 weeks in the UK charts and peaked at number 17. And there's a bit of a interesting backstory around the single. This is the second single from the Keep Moving album. The first one was Michael Caine, which is a brilliant one, but it didn't do that well in the eyes of the record label or perhaps the group. So they fought really hard on what they were going to put out as a second single. And the first choice was to put out Victoria Gardens, a track from Keep Moving. But in the last second, they had a change of mind and said, okay, let's put on One Better Day instead. I can't remember the reason now. It was years and years ago I read about this one. I can't really remember the real reason behind it. But that's why this cover on for this single looks a bit different, because it was to be associated with Victoria Gardens, right? So we have Lee Thompson here, I think it is, the saxophone player for Madness, standing there in Victoria Gardens. But it ended up to be One Better Day instead. But that's perhaps why some people may get a bit confused about the cover itself. But if we turn this over, if you bought the normal single, you would get One Better Day on the A side and Guns on the B side. And you do get that with this maxi single. But curiously enough, on the B side, you get Victoria Gardens, which was intended as the second single, of course, and Sarah, which I think was intended as the original B side for that one. So you do get two singles for the price of one when you get this maxi single. And they are not extended versions or anything like that. I do think Victoria Gardens is remixed somehow. It's a different mix from the album track. That's at least what I can remember from it. I will leave that to you guys to check out, because I should have checked it before this episode, but I didn't. I'm just taking things from the old head here. Yeah, that's Madness and One Better Day.
Starlight, the star I see tonight.
Yeah, this was of course Lucky Star with Madonna, and I'm really surprised this one never charted in Sweden, but it did chart in UK, and I think it peaked at number 14, spent a whole 9 weeks in the chart, and it's of course taken from her first album, her self-titled album Madonna. And at this point in time, I wasn't really familiar with Madonna. I was going to be acquainted with this Madonna a bit later this year with her second album, but that is a story for another day. But there was also another Madonna track, one of my favorite early Madonna track that charted in the UK, but not in Sweden, and it's this one.
You just keep on pushing my love over the borderline.
This is, of course, Borderline with Madonna, and this, like I said before, is one of my favorite early tracks with Madonna. I never get tired of this one. I think it's got a great production behind it, great voice, just a great song overall. And this one, I think it only peaked at number 56 place in the UK charts and spent 5 weeks in the same charts. And yeah, but this was just a humble beginnings, right, for Madonna, because like I said, 1984 was going to be a really big one for her. Really, really big. The last one that I'm going to mention on this episode is a single that was released back in March of 1984. And when I did my retrospective of March of 1984, I didn't base it on Poporama charts, so it got lost somehow, and I'm not really sure why, but I did misread some of those sales charts back then. So I'm going to make things better now by introducing you to Break Machine and Street Dance. Yeah, Break Machine and Street Dance. And it is a shame it only spent 1 week on the Poporama charts back in March of 1984. So I only got one chance. People were like, nah, I don't like it. Move on. How can they? I mean, this is great. This one spent 16 weeks in the UK charts, and I think it peaked at number 3. Yes, number 3. It peaked at number 3. And so it should. In my book, it should have gone to number 1. Yeah, and I know this is a commercialized side of rap that was becoming a real big thing at the time. But you know, to me, this was all new. It was exciting. I soaked it up. I was like a sponge when it came to everything that had to do with breakdance and rapping and all that. I just loved it. But I think they did a really good job here with Street Dance, even if it's commercialized. It's produced by Shaq Morali, and I think he's one of the producers behind Village People as well. And he knew how to package something like this to the wider audiences, and I think they did a great job. I know the clothes were good, the rapping was good, the beats were good, the whistling was outstanding. Break Machine and Street Dance, what a record. Still love it today, and I know it's nostalgia talking here, but love it. That's it, folks. That's it for this retrospective of May of 1984. Please let me know what some of your favorites from May of 1984. Do you have some different takes on some of the songs that we talked about today? You want to add something? Please do that down in the comments. And a big thank you for watching yet another video with me. And a huge thank you to all of you who are subscribing to my channel. And as usual, if you like the video, a thumbs up. That would support me greatly for this channel. And if you don't like it, put a thumbs down. I'm just after your honest opinion here. As usual, you all take care of yourself. And until next time, adieu.